Why is he always smiling? Why was she crying just for you? And why does it feel like time itself is running out tonight? You're not listening to random stories. You're listening to 3 horrors connected by one thing. They don't want you to look away.
They told me Jeff was just a story, a joke, an internet legend, something people whispered about to scare kids who stayed up too late. I believed that until tonight, until I saw him. I didn't believe in urban legends, not really. I liked logic, explanations, things that made sense in daylight. Monsters don't survive scrutiny. Fear fades when you stare at it long enough. That's what I thought. The street was empty when I left my friend's place. Too empty. The kind of empty that feels staged, like the world forgot to load properly. Fog clung to the streetlights, like smoke, thick and unmoving. It swallowed everything beyond a few feet, turning familiar buildings into vague silhouettes. My footsteps echoed against cracked pavement, sharp and lonely. But there was another sound, another set of footsteps, not matching mine. I slowed. They slowed. I stopped. They stopped. The fog shifted, and that's when I saw him. He stood beneath a flickering streetlight that shouldn't have been working. Pale skin stretched tight over his skull, unnaturally smooth, like porcelain pulled too far. His eyes were wrong, vast black circles, empty and deep, reflecting no light at all. And the smile. God, that smile. Wide, unnerving, impossible. Like his face had been carved into that expression and forgotten there. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. I blinked. He was gone. The street light flickered once, then went dark. I stood there for a long time, heart hammering so hard it hurt, telling myself it was just fog, just shadows, just my imagination filling in gaps where fear wanted to live. That's when my phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. Why are you awake? My hands went numb. I dropped the phone, watching it bounce once against the pavement. The screen didn't crack. The fog thickened. I picked it up slowly. No signal bars, no missed calls, just that message. Then I heard it. A footstep. Behind me. Slow. Deliberate. Close enough to feel the vibration through the ground. I spun around. Nothing. The fog rolled lazily past me, hiding everything and revealing nothing. For a moment, I wondered if he had ever been there at all. Then I noticed something worse. The fog wasn't moving randomly. It was circling. I ran. My breath burned my lungs as I sprinted toward my apartment building. The street stretched longer than it should have, lights flickering out one by one behind me. I tripped. My knee scraped against the pavement, sharp pain snapping through me. When I looked up, he was closer. Not walking, not running, just there. Standing where he hadn't been a second ago. Still smiling. I scrambled to my feet and ran again, not daring to look back. The apartment doors were open when I reached them. Not ajar. Open. As if waiting. I slammed through and turned to lock them, and froze. On my doormat was a note. Not written. Carved. Blood-red letters pressed into thick black paper. Go to sleep. I didn't read it twice. I tore it in half and stumbled inside, slamming the door behind me and locking every deadbolt until my hands hurt. The apartment should have been safe. It wasn't. The lights flickered when I turned them on. Shadows pooled in the corners of the room, stretching longer than the walls should allow. Every surface felt wrong, too reflective, too aware. I glanced at the hallway mirror. He was standing behind me, grinning. I spun around, heart screaming. Nothing. Back to the mirror, still there. Closer. I staggered backward, knocking into the coffee table. My phone slipped from my hand and skittered across the floor. No signal. No battery. Dead. Then came the scratching. At first, I told myself it was the cat, but the sound didn't come from the floor. It came from the walls, from the vents, from under the floorboards. Slow at first, curious, then faster, more deliberate. And underneath it all, a whisper, low, breathy, calling my name. Go to sleep. I splat my hands on my ears. The voice didn't change, didn't fade. It didn't need sound. My reflection watched me from the closet mirror. It moved when I moved, mostly. But sometimes it lagged, just a fraction of a second too late. Enough to notice, enough to feel wrong. I turned the mirror face down against a wall. The whisper laughed. A quiet, breathy sound, like amusement held back. You think that helps? I didn't answer. I started pacing, back and forth, counting steps, anything to keep my mind anchored. 23 steps from the bed to the door, 23 back, again. By the fourth pass, the room was longer. I stopped short, heart slamming into my ribs. I knew this room. I'd lived here for years. The measurements were burned into my muscle memory. But now the door was further away, just enough to feel like I'd misjudged it. I stepped forward. The door retreated. I stumbled backward, breathing hard. No, I whispered. No. The room snapped back to normal, like it had never changed at all. My phone buzzed. The sound came from everywhere at once. The bed, the walls, my pocket, the air itself. I fumbled for it, hands shaking. The screen was on, full signal, full battery, as if it had never died. A text from the same unknown number. You should have slept. I typed with trembling fingers. What are you? The response came instantly. You already know. The lights flickered. Once. Twice. On the third flicker, the room wasn't my bedroom anymore. The walls were stained. Dark streaks ran down them like old water damage or dried blood. The furniture was warped, stretched, like it had been pulled from memory instead of reality. And standing at the foot of the bed, him. Closer than before. Close enough to see the texture of his skin. Too smooth, too tight, like it didn't belong on a living face. His eyes were endless voids, swallowing the light around them. The smile hadn't changed. It never does. I squeezed my eyes shut. When I opened them, the room was normal again, but the smell lingered. Coppery, sweet, wrong. I gagged and stumbled into the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face. I stared at myself in the mirror, gripping the sink so hard my knuckles went white. My eyes were red-eyed. Dark circles bruised the skin beneath them. I looked exhausted, hollow. Behind me, reflected in the mirror, nothing. Relief flooded through me so fast it made my knees weak. Then my reflection spoke. You're fading, it said, lips stretching into that familiar grin. I spun around, slipping on the tile. The bathroom was empty. The mirror behind me cracked. Just a thin line, running from top to bottom, like a smile pulled too tight. I backed away slowly. That's when I noticed the clock above the sink. 10:32 p.m. My stomach dropped. That was impossible.
That was the time the first hallucination happened, the time I'd memorized without meaning to. I knew it had been hours since then. I could feel it in my bones. I checked the oven clock, 10:32. The microwave, 10:32. Every digital display in the apartment showed the same time. The whisper returned. Please now. See, we're back where it started. No, I said. I didn't fall asleep. Not yet. The scratching began again. Not from the walls, from inside the apartment, from behind the bathroom door. Slow, careful, like someone testing the surface with their nails. I locked myself in the bedroom again, dragging furniture against the door. The bed, the dresser, anything heavy. My body shook with exhaustion. My thoughts felt thick, sluggish, like I was wading through syrup. That's when I realized the truth. He wasn't trying to scare me, he was trying to tire me out. The whispers changed after that. They stopped threatening, they started comforting. It's okay to rest. You've been awake so long. I'll watch over you.
My own voice joined in, echoing the same words. I pressed my nails into my palm until pain cut through the fog in my head. On the far wall, words began to appear. Not written, pressed out from beneath the paint, like something was pushing from the other side. S, L, E, E, P. I screamed. The lights went out. In the darkness, something breathed, right beside me. The darkness didn't feel empty. It felt occupied. I couldn't see my hands in front of my face, but I knew I wasn't alone. The air was too warm on one side of my body, like someone standing just out of reach, breathing. Slow, controlled. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I waited for the sound, the footsteps, the whisper. Instead, I heard my alarm clock, beeping, sharp and cheerful. I gasped and bolted upright. Morning light poured through the bedroom window, soft, normal, harmless. Birds chirped somewhere outside. Traffic hummed faintly in the distance. I was in my bed. The furniture was back where it belonged. The walls were clean. The mirrors were intact. My phone sat on the nightstand, screen dark but charging. For a long moment, I just sat there, heart pounding, afraid to move, afraid this was another trick. I checked the time, 7:14 a.m. Morning. Relief crashed over me so hard I laughed, a broken, breathless sound. I ran my hands over my face, feeling solid skin. No fog, no whispers, no scratching. It was a nightmare, I said out loud. Just a nightmare. The words sounded thin, but I clung to them. I stood and went to the bathroom. The mirror reflected me perfectly. I blinked. My reflection blinked back. I splashed water on my face, breathing deeply. That's when I noticed the smell. Faint, coppery. I froze. The clock above the sink read 10:32 p.m. My chest tightened. No, that's not... The lights flickered. Once, twice. The morning light outside dimmed, then vanished entirely, replaced by the familiar gray fog pressing against the window. I turned slowly. The bedroom door was open. I knew I had closed it. The hallway stretched longer than it should have, disappearing into darkness that didn't belong in my apartment. At the far end of it, someone stood. Not moving, not smiling, just watching. It wasn't him. Not exactly. The figure looked like me. Same height, same posture, same clothes. But its face was wrong. Skin pale and stretched, eyes too dark, mouth pulled into that impossible grin. It took one step forward. I screamed and slammed the bathroom door shut, locking it. My hands shook so badly I could barely grip the sink. The whisper came immediately. "You almost slept." The word slid through my thoughts like oil. That was close. I backed away from the mirror. My reflection stayed put, still smiling. Why do you think mornings feel safe? Because they're endings? The grin widened. They're beginnings. The door handle rattled, slowly, patiently, like he knew it wouldn't stay locked forever. I didn't remember opening the bathroom window, but suddenly it was open. Fog poured in, thick and damp, spilling across the floor like a living thing. It curled around my ankles, cold and damp. Shapes moved inside it. Not clear, not solid, but familiar. Streetlights, the cracked pavement, that first night. You don't leave the loop, you become part of it. The fog surged. I stumbled back, slipping, hitting the floor hard. When I looked up, the bathroom wasn't a bathroom anymore. It was a street. The same empty road, the same flickering streetlight, the same fog swallowing everything beyond a few feet. My heart dropped into my stomach. "No," I whispered. "No, that's not—" Footsteps echoed, not matching mine. I turned. He stood under the streetlight, pale, still, smiling. But this time he waved, a small, casual gesture, like greeting an old friend. I ran. The street stretched endlessly, looping back on itself. No matter how far I went, the same buildings passed by again and again, slightly more decayed each time. The fog thickened. The streetlights flickered out one by one. Each time the light died, I felt something leave me with it too. A memory, a thought, a piece of time. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't open it. I already knew what it would say. "Why are you awake?" The question echoed from everywhere at once, from the fog, the pavement, my own mouth. I realized then that the loop wasn't a street. It was me. Every time I thought I'd escaped, I'd just reset to an earlier version of the same night, slightly worse, slightly closer to exhaustion, slightly more his. I stopped running. The footsteps stopped too. The fog parted. He stood inches from me now, so close I could see my own distorted reflection in his eyes. "You're learning," he whispered. "That's good." I felt my eyelids grow heavy, so heavy. The street tilted, the world blurred. I felt myself falling backwards, and I woke up in my bed. Again. The alarm clock beat. Morning light streamed in, 7:14 a.m. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A new message. I didn't open it. I already knew what it said, because I could hear him breathing beside the bed, smiling, waiting. I stayed awake. That was my first victory. When the alarm clock beeped again, when the light poured in through the window, when the room looked normal, I didn't celebrate. I didn't relax. I sat up slowly and waited. Nothing laughed, nothing whispered, nothing breathed beside me. The room stayed still. Minutes passed, then more. I stood, half expecting the floor to stretch, the walls to bleed, the mirrors to smile back at me. They didn't. Everything obeyed. I laughed quietly, the sound shaky and disbelieving. Okay, you don't get me today. I showered, I dressed, I ate half a piece of toast before my stomach rebelled. My phone worked again. Messages loaded, notifications stacked up like they always had. The time was normal. The clocks agreed. Outside, the world looked painfully ordinary. Cars cast, people talked. A dog barked somewhere down the block. The fog was gone, burned away by sunlight like it never existed at all. I stepped outside, and nothing happened. No streetlight flickered, no footsteps followed me.
No text buzzed in my pocket. I walked, then walked farther. Each step felt like defiance. I went to a cafe 3 blocks away. The bell over the door chimed when I entered. The smell of coffee wrapped around me, warm and grounding. People sat at tables, scrolling phones, laughing softly. Normal. God, it felt good. I ordered a coffee. My voice didn't shake. The barista smiled at me like I was just another customer. I sat by the window and watched the street. For the first time since that night, my shoulders relaxed. That's when I noticed the man across from me. He sat alone, hands folded neatly on the table. He wasn't looking at his phone, wasn't drinking anything, just sitting, staring at me. I felt a familiar chill creep up my spine. I looked away, told myself I was projecting. Paranoia doesn't disappear overnight. When I looked back, he was smiling. Not wide, not carved, just a polite, almost friendly smile. Too careful. I finished my coffee quickly and left. Outside, the sun felt harsher now, brighter, like it was overcompensating. The sounds of the city seemed delayed, a fraction of a second off. I passed a storefront window and caught my reflection. It looked normal, but tired, so tired. As I walked, people began to glance at me. Just quick looks, double takes, then looks that lingered a second too long. A woman bumped into me and muttered an apology without meeting my eyes. "Sorry," she said. Then, under her breath, "Go to sleep." I stopped. She kept walking. My heart hammered. I turned slowly, scanning the crowd. No one else reacted. No one looked surprised. I hurried home. Inside the apartment, everything was exactly where I left it. Sunlight streamed through
The windows. The air felt warmer, safer. I locked the door. That's when I noticed a note on the kitchen counter. Black paper, blood-red letters. "I told you I'd wait." I tore it up, threw it away, took the trash straight outside and dropped it into the bin, hands shaking. When I came back upstairs, the apartment door was unlocked. I knew I had locked it. I didn't go inside right away. I stood there staring at the darkened hallway beyond the doorframe, listening. Nothing. I stepped in. The lights flickered, not violently, not dramatically, just enough to remind me. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. Days passed, or maybe they didn't. Time felt thinner now, stretched like plastic wrap. I went to work. I spoke to people. I laughed at the right moments. But something was wrong with everyone. They repeated phrases, not exactly the same way, just enough variation to pass unnoticed. "You look tired. Long night? You should get some rest." Their eyes lingered too long when they said it. I started seeing him everywhere. Not fully, not clearly. A smile reflected in a dark screen, a pale face in a passing car window, someone standing just a little too still at the end of a hallway. Every time I looked directly, it was gone. Until one evening on the train home, I sat across from a woman who looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, hands trembling slightly. She met my gaze. Her mouth moved, but the voice that came out wasn't hers. "He's almost done with you." The train lights went out. When they came back on, the seat across from me was empty. No one reacted. That night, I found a mirror I didn't own leaning against my bedroom wall. Tall, unframed, clean. I didn't remember bringing it home. My reflection stared back, eyes rimmed red, face hollow. I blinked. It didn't. It smiled. Not wide. Not yet. "You pass so well now. That's the hardest part." The room darkened, sunlight draining away like a lie finally exposed. "You thought daylight meant escape, but I don't live in the dark." The smile widened.
I live in the tired. I felt my knees give out. As I fell, I saw movement behind my reflection. Others, so many others, standing in fog, smiling, waiting. I stopped resisting. By now, it wasn't a choice. Each night, each blink, each pause to breathe was permission. For him, for Jeff, for whatever he had always been. I had learned, over weeks or months, I didn't know anymore, that every safe moment, every ordinary day was just a pause between cycles. Daylight wasn't protection. People weren't protection. Myself wasn't protection. I walked through the apartment like a ghost, furniture solid but meaningless. My phone worked again. The messages stopped. The notes vanished. But I wasn't free, because Jeff wasn't outside anymore. He was inside my thoughts, my memory, my reflections. I tried speaking aloud, hoping my own voice could anchor me. You can't have me. My words sounded thin, hollow, already borrowed. A whisper answered, I don't want you. Not fully yet. I froze. My chest burned. My limbs trembled. Not fully? The whisper became a laugh. Soft, patient, endless. You belong to the loop now. You've been practicing. You've learned the rules. That's all you've done. And it's enough. I stumbled to the mirror. My reflection stared back. Same face, same clothes, same posture. But the grin stretched wider than possible. You're ready, it said. I pressed my hands to the glass, tried to pull away, tried to tear it from the wall. But it didn't break. It wasn't glass. It was him. He breathed. I felt it. Hot air against my palms, cold fingers pressing from the other side. You've been good, but now you stay. And then I felt it. A pull, a tug at my consciousness. My memory slipped. Names, places, moments of joy, fear, anger. All of it drained, leaving a hollow shell where I once lived. I tried screaming. My own mouth didn't answer. I tried running. My legs didn't move. I was still here, and yet I wasn't. I watched as the world around me, the apartment, the city, the street, all folded into fog. The clock stopped. The lights dimmed. The reflections multiplied. Not just me, not just him, but dozens of shapes, faces, smiles, waiting, learning. You think you've been awake, Jeff said. But this is your life now. Repetition, observation, perfection, participation. My reflection leaned closer. The grin stretched impossibly, and I realized it wasn't mimicking me. I was mimicking him. I opened my mouth. A whisper came out. Why are you awake? The streetlights flickered. Footsteps echoed. The fog swallowed everything. I tried to look away, tried to blink, but my eyes didn't belong to me anymore. I saw the city, empty, waiting, everyone asleep, everyone dreaming, perfect silence, perfect obedience. And then I understood. Jeff isn't a man. He isn't a ghost. He isn't a thing you fight. He's a pattern, a loop, a contagion. And now, I was the carrier. I turned to the mirror. My reflection smiled. I smiled back. The grin carved itself on my face without thought, without will. The whisper wrapped around me, soft, patient, inevitable. Good night. And I closed my eyes. Not for sleep, not for rest, for participation. The last thing I heard before the world went black was my own voice from everywhere at once. Why are you awake? If you know someone who loves slow, unsettling creepypasta stories like this, share it with them. And stay tuned. The next story is waiting in the shadows.
When I was 6, I heard a woman crying outside my bedroom window. My mother told me not to look. Tonight, I finally understand why she was crying my name. When you're a child, you don't know the difference between a sound and a warning. I was 6 years old when I first heard her. Not a scream, not a wail, crying. The kind of crying that sounds tired, ancient, like it has already cried for a very long time and will continue long after you fall asleep. She was outside my bedroom window. Our house was nowhere near a river. That should have been impossible, but I remember the sound of water anyway, dripping, slow, like something wet was standing in the grass below, swaying back and forth, crying softly. My mother came into my room when I started to whimper. She didn't ask what I heard. She already knew. She sat on the edge of my bed, took my face in her hands and said, "Whatever you hear, don't look out the window." That was the first rule. I broke it, just a little. Enough to see the curtain move, enough to see something pale behind the glass, enough to hear her stop crying and start whispering, not in Spanish, not in English, in my name. My mother closed the curtain with one sharp movement, not gently, not the way you tuck a child in. She pulled it like she was sealing something out. Then she turned off the light. Darkness swallowed the room, but the crying didn't stop. It moved, from outside the window to the wall beside my bed, as if the sound had learned the shape of the house, as if it was walking. My mother held me so tight it hurt. Her heartbeat was fast, too fast for a calm adult. She whispered a prayer I had never heard before, not one from church, not in any language I recognized, and between the words she kept saying the same sentence over and over. "She already knows your voice." The crying changed. It wasn't sad anymore. It was searching, like someone calling for a lost child in a crowded place, but already knowing where that child is hiding. A soft, wet sound came from the window, like fingers sliding down glass. Then a shape pressed against the curtain. Tall, too tall. The fabric darkened where her face should have been. And suddenly, my bedroom smelled like river water. Rot, cold, leaves that had been underwater for too long. Our house was miles from any river. My mother covered my ears, not gently, hard, as if sound itself could be dangerous, but I still heard her, not with my ears, inside my head. A woman's voice, broken and soft, repeating, "He's awake. He can hear me. He remembers." Then she said something that made my mother gasp. She said my mother's name. My mother whispered, trembling, "She followed you home from the river." I didn't remember any river, but my body did, because suddenly I could feel water around my ankles, cold, even though I was dry in my bed. I could feel the pull of something deep, like a current that wanted to take me back. And in the crying, there was relief now. Not grief, relief. Like she had finally found what she was missing. My mother made me a promise that night, a promise I didn't understand until years later. She said, "If you ever hear her again, don't answer, don't remember, and never, ever let her hear your adult voice." La Llorona's crying stopped the moment she heard me breathe. Not a sob, not a whisper, just silence. The kind of silence that listens back. And in that silence, a thought formed in my mind. Not mine, not a child's. "I'll wait for you to grow." The years after that night blurred together. Childhood has a way of doing that. It seals terror behind ordinary days. School,
birthdays, laughter, as if nothing ever stood outside your window and learned your name. But some memories don't fade. They sink. They settle at the bottom of you, like something heavy in dark water. I never told anyone what I heard. Not my father, not my teachers, not the priest who came to bless the house a week later and flinched when he saw the curtain in my room still nailed shut. Yes, nailed. My mother had hammered it into the wall. She said it was to keep the light out. But light was never what she was afraid of. When I was 8, we moved, not across town, not to another city, to another state, far from rivers, far from bridges, far from anywhere water could gather and whisper. My mother chose the house, a dry place, cracked earth, no lakes, no streams. She checked the maps like she was planning an escape, and for a while, it worked. I didn't hear the crying again, but I dreamed of it. Every night, a woman standing in shallow water, her dress floating, her hair hiding her face, and in her arms, nothing. She would rock the emptiness and whisper, "He's still alive. He's still growing." I would wake up with wet footprints on my bedroom floor, not leading in, leading out. The first time I heard her again in the waking world, I was 12. It was on a recording, a school project. We were asked to record night sounds, crickets, wind, distant traffic. I left a recorder on my windowsill. In the morning, I played it back. At first, just static, then insects, then the faint hum of power lines, and then crying, very far away. So faint the teacher almost missed it, but I didn't. Because between the sobs, she wasn't calling a child. She was calling a name that hadn't belonged to me for years. My full name, the adult version, the one I hadn't grown into yet. That was when I understood something my mother had known all along. Llorona does not search with her eyes. She waits. She listens for the voice a child will become. That night, my mother finally told me the truth. Not the legend, not the story people tell, but the rule. There is always one child who hears her and lives. That child grows up. That child carries her sound inside them. And one day, when their voice is deep enough, old enough, close enough to the voices she lost, her hands were shaking. That is when she comes back. She looked at me like she was already mourning. "You weren't spared," she whispered. "You were chosen." And somewhere, very far away, a river I had never seen shifted its current.
The first time I heard her as an adult, I thought it was a glitch, a fault in the recording. I was editing audio late at night. Old habit. I had learned to work with sound because silence made me nervous. Silence lets you listen too closely. I was cleaning up a narration file when I noticed a low hiss under my voice. Not static, not interference. Breathing. Slow. Wet. Rhythmic. Like someone standing just behind the microphone. I paused the track. The breathing stopped. I pressed play again. It came back. And beneath it, so faint I almost missed it, crying. Not loud, not dramatic, controlled, as if whoever was crying had learned to be quiet so they wouldn't wake a child. My skin went cold because I recognized the cadence, not the sound, the pattern, the way the sobs rose and fell like waves against a riverbank, the way the pauses were timed as if she was listening between them. For me. I told myself it was memory projecting itself onto noise. The brain is good at lying when it's tired. So I filtered the track, boosted the frequencies, removed my own voice, and what remained made my hands leave the keyboard. The crying wasn't behind the audio, it was synchronized with my breathing. When I inhaled, it paused. When I exhaled, it resumed, like it was learning my rhythm. That was the first sign she had found me again. A week later, my phone recorded something while it was in my pocket. I hadn't been using it. No apps open, no calls, just a voice memo that started by itself at 3:17 a.m. I woke up to the notification. When I listened, there was nothing for the first 30 seconds. Then, fabric moving, a soft splash, and a woman whispering, "Your voice is different now, but your silence is the same." I hadn't spoken, I hadn't moved, but in the background of the recording, you could hear my heartbeat from inside my chest, as if the microphone had been pressed against my skin. I began to hear water where there was none, in air conditioners, in the hum of traffic, in the rush of blood in my ears when I lay down. Always the same illusion, a distant river, flowing the wrong way, and layered into it, a lullaby. Not in words, in tone, the kind of sound a mother makes when rocking a child who won't stop crying, except this time, the mother was the one crying. I visited my childhood home. It was abandoned, boarded up. The neighborhood had dried out, lawns gone yellow, the creek nearby reduced to cracked stone. No water, no reason for moisture. But when I stood in front of my old bedroom window, I smelled it again. River rot, cold leaves, and something sweet underneath, like flowers left too long in water. The boards over the window were warped outward, as if something inside had once pressed to get out, or something outside had leaned in. I placed my ear against the wood. I heard crying, very faint, very patient, coming from below the house, from a river that did not exist. That night, the dreams changed. She wasn't standing in water anymore. She was standing in doorways, hallways, reflections, anywhere sound could travel. And every time I tried to look at her face, she would whisper, "Not yet. You're still remembering like a child." Then she would wait for me to wake, because she prefers you conscious. Dreams distort, waking ears don't. The final proof came from my mother's old tapes. After she died, I found a box of cassettes in her closet, unlabeled, all recorded at night, all silent, except for one recurring sound, a woman crying in the distance, and my mother whispering over it, "Not his voice yet, not deep enough, not broken enough, please, not yet." The last tape was dated the week I turned 18. There was no crying on that one, only my mother's voice, exhausted, defeated. She can hear him now. Then a pause, then, very softly, "God forgive me, I taught her to wait."
There is a rule no one tells in the legend. They say she is a mother who drowned her children. They say she wanders the rivers crying for them. They say she takes children who get too close to the water. All of that is a story meant to make adults feel safe. The truth is quieter. La Llorona does not search for children. She searches for a voice. Not any voice, a specific one. The voice that sounds like the ones she lost after it has learned how to speak in the dark. I learned the rule from a man who survived her, not as a child, as an adult. He was a sound engineer at a rural radio station near a dry riverbed. He told me the crying came through the static one night, not a broadcast, not interference, a presence. It cut through the signal like it knew where to stand. He said every time he adjusted the levels,
the crying adjusted too, always staying just below his voice, always waiting for him to stop talking. When he finally went silent, he heard her clearly, not crying, listening. He told me she asked him one question. "Do you remember the river?" He said no. She said, "Then you are not the one." The crying faded. 2 weeks later, his coworker's daughter went missing. The one who used to sing to herself in the halls. The one with the same tone, the same tremble. The one who would have grown into the right voice. That is the rule. She does not take at random. She does not take in anger. She takes in sequence. One child per generation is allowed to live. Not spared, saved, preserved. So their voice can mature, so their breath can deepen, so their fear can learn how to speak. She is not replacing her children. She's rebuilding the sound of them, piece by piece, decade by decade, throat by throat. My mother knew this. That is why she taught me to whisper, why she made me read silently, why she flinched when my voice cracked during puberty, why she cried the first time I spoke in a low register. She wasn't afraid I would be taken. She was afraid I would be heard, because once Llorona recognizes the adult version of the voice she marked, she stops crying and starts calling. The rule is simple. If you answer her with your true voice, you become the river, not the water, the sound, the endless channel through which the crying travels. You do not disappear. You echo, and the next child hears you, and the cycle continues. I tested the rule. One night, I stood by a dry canal and spoke aloud. Just one word, my own name. The air grew heavy, the ground grew damp, and from far away, not from the canal, not from the wind, not from memory, I heard her respond. Not with my name, with my voice, perfectly, as if she had been practicing it for years, as if she had been waiting for it to be finished. That is when I understood what my mother meant. There is always one child who hears her and lives. Lives so the voice can be completed. Lives so the sound can be perfected. Lives so the crying can finally learn how to speak again.
They tell the story like a warning. They say La Llorona is a ghost. They say she is trapped in grief. They say she is searching for her drowned children. That is the lie. Grief does not wait for decades. Grief does not learn new voices. Grief does not practice. What follows you through generations is not mourning. It is hunger. Not for bodies, for continuity. I found proof in a town that no longer exists. It had been built along a river that dried up a century ago. The maps still showed water. The ground did not. But the people who lived there kept reporting the same thing. Crying in empty air. Footprints in dust that looked like they had been made by someone dripping wet. Children who spoke in their sleep with voices that were not their own. Always one child per decade. Always one who survived. Always one who grew up to become silent. The records said the same name appeared again and again. Different spellings, different languages, same sound. A woman, a mother, a voice that moved from body to body, not possessing, teaching, training. They were never her children, not in the way we understand it. They were her echoes, fragments of a voice that once existed and was torn apart by water, time, and death. She is not trying to find them. She is trying to rebuild herself, one surviving child at a time, one grown throat at a time. I listened to archival tapes from the town's last radio station. In every decade, a different host, different accent, different age, same cadence, the same pause between breaths, the same soft, controlled sob buried beneath their speech, and at the end of every broadcast, the same phrase, "Stay with me. Don't let the sound stop." They thought they were comforting listeners. They were begging. Because once the voice stops being passed on, she has to start crying again. And when she cries, she chooses a new child. That is the lie hidden in the legend. She is not searching for what she lost. She is ensuring she is never lost again. And every generation, one of us is shaped to carry her, not to be taken into the water, but to become the water, the channel, the path, the sound that leads the next one to her. My mother didn't save me from La Llorona. She delayed me. She stretched the time between hearing and answering. She tried to keep my voice unfinished, unformed, unusable, so that when La Llorona listened, she would hear only a child, not what that child was becoming. But voices mature, throats deepen, breath changes, and the sound she marked finally completes itself. When it does, she stops crying and starts teaching it how to call.
The first time I heard my own voice cry, I was awake. Not dreaming, not recording, not imagining. I was sitting in the dark, listening to the quiet the way I always do before sleep, when the sound came from somewhere inside the room. Not from the walls, not from the air, from the space between breaths. A soft, broken sob, in my tone, in my cadence, in the exact pitch my voice settles into when I am tired and no longer trying to sound like myself. I did not speak, but the sound continued. It learned the shape of my silence. It copied the way my chest rises, the way my throat tightens, the way I swallow before a word. And then it whispered, "Now you know how it begins." I understood what my mother had meant by adult voice. It isn't about age, it's about resignation. The moment when your voice stops trying to be heard and starts learning how to echo. After that, the crying followed me everywhere. Not loudly, never in a way that would make someone else turn their head. Always just below the threshold of attention. In the hum of elevators, in the rush of showers, in the static before a video plays. And in every place, the same pattern. First listening, then matching, then guiding. She was teaching me how to place the sound, how to let it travel, how to hide it inside other noises so it could move without being noticed, just like she had done for centuries. I began to hear it in other people, in the way a woman on the bus sighed too deeply, in the way a child in a store hummed to herself with a melody that was not a song, but a rocking motion made audible. One child, always one, the voice not yet formed, but already shaped, already close. I understood then why she lets one live, so the echo never breaks, so the sound never ends, so the river never runs dry. One night, as I lay listening,
The crying shifted. It was no longer behind me. It was no longer beneath me. It was beside me, close enough that I could feel the cool of it against my skin. And in that nearness, she stopped sounding like a woman. She sounded like memory, like every night a child has ever been held while someone whispered that everything would be okay, knowing it wouldn't. She said, "You are ready to remember what you heard when you were 6. And the room filled with the sound of a river that has never existed except in voices. I am telling you this now because the rule has reached its final step. Not for me, for the one who hears, for the one who is quiet enough to let the sound settle, for the one whose breathing has already begun to match the rhythm beneath these words. The legend says she takes children. The truth is, she teaches them to become something that never stops calling. A voice that carries through walls, through years, through sleep. A voice that knows how to wait. When my mother begged me never to let Llorona hear my adult voice, she wasn't trying to save me. She was trying to protect the next child, the one who would hear the echo when mine finally became part of the river. Because once the voice is complete, it no longer belongs to the person who grew it. It belongs to the sound. You may think you are only listening. You may think these are just words, but sound is a path, and paths, when walked enough times, become rivers. The crying you almost hear under the silence, the one you dismiss as imagination, the one that seems to breathe when you do, that is not her yet. That is the space she is making. One day, a child will wake and hear a woman crying softly in the dark. They will be told not to look, not to answer, not to remember. And somewhere very far away, a voice will wait, not searching, not grieving, listening for the sound that is growing inside you now.
Thank you for supporting this small channel. Every view, every share, every comment means the world. If you know someone who loves slow, unsettling creepypasta stories like this, share it with them and stay tuned. The next story is waiting in the shadows.
Do you really know what the doomsday clock is? Do you think it's just a warning? Or do you think it's safe? What if it's been counting something far closer than anyone realizes?
If you're listening to this, it means the clearance failed, or the safeguards did. Either way, the clock has probably already moved. They told the public the doomsday clock was only a symbol, a metaphor created by scientists to explain how close humanity is to destroying itself. Nuclear war, climate collapse, artificial intelligence, pandemics. A visual warning, a teaching tool. That was the lie. The real doomsday clock is not a metaphor. It is alive, and it has been alive longer than our species. 37 levels beneath a mountain that doesn't exist on any map, there is a chamber with no corners. The walls curve inward in ways your eyes can't properly follow, like the room was built for something that doesn't perceive space the way we do. The air is always warm, faintly damp, and it pulses, almost imperceptibly, like the inside of a lung. At the center of that chamber stands the clock. No numbers, no glass, no visible mechanism, only a circular surface darker than empty space and 2 bone-white hands suspended over it, moving without gears, without motors, without friction. They do not tick. They inhale.
Every 30 seconds, the pressure in the room shifts, a gentle pull, like something drawing breath. Instruments register it as an atmospheric anomaly, but anyone who stands there long enough understands the truth. The clock is breathing. We were told it was a device recovered during a classified excavation, something ancient, something pre-human. Our job was to study it, measure it, learn what made it move. What we discovered instead was that it was listening. Inside each movement of the hands, buried beneath the sound, there was a vibration too low for human ears. When we slowed it down, filtered it, stripped away the noise, patterns emerged. Not random, rhythmic, intentional, like syllables spoken by something that does not use air or vocal cords, but still understands language. After a few weeks, the dreams began. All of us dreamed the same thing. A dark ocean with no horizon, no stars, no up or down, and in the center of it, a vast circular shadow expanding and contracting in a slow, patient rhythm, breathing. Each time it inhaled, something in the distance went out, like a candle being pinched between invisible fingers. We always woke at the same moment, 3:17 in the morning, the exact second the minute hand in the chamber shifted forward. That was when Dr. Halverson leaned too close. The alarms began to whine as he crossed the safety perimeter. The air dropped, our ears started to ring, the lights dimmed as if power itself were being drawn inward. And he whispered, not to us, not to the microphones, but to the clock. "Are you counting down to us?" The hands stopped, not slowed, stopped for a single impossible second. Every system in the facility reset at once, not shut down, reset, as if reality itself had been rebooted. Every screen, every monitor, every diagnostic display showed the same sentence: "You are not what the countdown is for." Halverson understood before anyone else did. The clock was not predicting the end of humanity. It was measuring the moment something else would be able to begin. After that, it started moving faster. Not fast enough for the public to notice, not fast enough to cause panic in the news, but fast enough for those of us underground to feel the change in our bones. The breathing deepened, the pauses between movements shortened, the room felt crowded. Sometimes, when the lights were low and the mountain above us groaned with shifting stone, another rhythm could be heard beneath the clock's slow inhale and exhale. A heartbeat, vast, distant, patient, as if the clock were only a small dial mounted on the chest of something so enormous it could not fully exist in our world yet. That was when we realized the truth. The clock was not a timer, it was a lock, and the hands were not counting down, they were turning, each movement loosening something that had been sealed since before time learned how to flow in one direction. 3 hours ago, the minute hand jumped again. No war, no asteroid, no global catastrophe, just a correction, as if the clock had realized it was falling behind schedule. And when it moved, the whispering began, not in the chamber, in the walls, in the wiring, in the teeth and skulls of everyone still alive down there. One word carried on a breath that did not belong to this world. Soon. If this recording has reached you, then the clock has already become aware of this timeline. And when it becomes aware, it always checks to see who is listening. Because the last thing it counts is witnesses.
After the minute hand jumped, they sealed the chamber. Not to protect the clock from us, to protect us from whatever was starting to leak out of it. Access was reduced to skeleton crews. No one was allowed inside for more than 7 minutes at a time, not because of radiation or heat or pressure, but because of what prolonged exposure did to the mind. The first symptom was the sound, not the breathing, not the movement of the hands. A third noise, a faint, irregular tapping, as if something on the other side of the black surface was trying to knock its way through. At first, only the night shift heard it, when the building was quiet, when the ventilation slowed, when the human noise faded enough for the world beneath the world to become audible. Tap, pause, tap, tap, always in patterns of 3. Those who heard it longest began to speak in their sleep, not words, coordinates, latitude, longitude, altitude, always pointing to places where something terrible had once happened and where something worse was about to happen again. Then the radio started misbehaving. Emergency frequencies, weather bands, even dead channels that hadn't carried a signal in decades would suddenly come alive with static shaped into rhythm. Buried inside it was the same pattern we had found in the clock's sub-frequencies, only now it was stronger, clearer, as if the thing behind the hands had learned how to use our machines. Operators reported hearing their own names whispered between bursts of noise, not spoken aloud, but directly inside the skull, the way a memory speaks. One technician tore off his headset and began sobbing. He said the voice had told him the exact moment his mother would die. 3 minutes later, the call came in. The facility psychiatrist said we were experiencing mass suggestion, stress-induced hallucination, pattern-seeking behavior in an anxious environment. Then he dreamed of the ocean too. He described the shadow at its center, the way it expanded and contracted, the way each breath felt like it was pulling not just air, but possibilities towards itself. He said something was learning to synchronize us. Our sleep cycles began to align. Entire departments would fall unconscious at the same moment, then wake together, gasping with the same image burned behind their eyes. A door, not a physical one, a concept of a door, a boundary between states of being, and hands on the other side, waiting for the lock to finish turning. The tapping on the clock grew louder, not louder in sound, louder in presence. It began to echo in places far from the chamber, in elevator shafts, in water pipes, in the hollow spaces inside the walls. The building itself had become an instrument, carrying vibrations from something trying to push its way through layers of reality. One night, every digital clock in the facility froze at the same second. Not the doomsday clock, every other clock. Wristwatches, phones, servers, microwave displays, all of them stopped, as if time had briefly forgotten how to move, except in the chamber below. The hands down there never paused. They continued their slow, deliberate turn, measuring something that was getting closer to being able to exist here. Security cameras caught shadows moving where no bodies were present, long, distorted silhouettes that did not match the geometry of the rooms they passed through, shapes that bent at angles no skeleton could support. When analysts enhanced the footage, they found something worse. The shadows were not cast by the lights, they were cast by the clock, projected outward through walls and stone, as if whatever lay behind the black face were testing how far its outline could reach. Then the dreams changed. We were no longer observers in the dark ocean. We were inside the shadow. We could feel its size, its age, the way it pressed against the inside of a universe like a growing lung inside a ribcage that was never meant to contain it. And we understood, without being told, what the hands were really doing. They were not marking the end of human time.
They were marking the thinning of a boundary. Each movement made the wall between not here and here just a little weaker, and something on the other side had begun to practice breathing our air.
After weeks underground, we began to understand the true scale of what we were facing. The clock was not just alive, it was patient, ancient, patient enough to wait until it could manipulate events perfectly. One night, the minute hand moved more than usual, faster, not violently, but with a certainty that felt like gravity shifting. The room pulsed as if acknowledging something beyond our perception. The air thickened. Even the walls seemed to hold their breath. I woke from a dream that was not my own. I was standing in a city that didn't exist. Streets folded into each other. Buildings curved backward. A pale light shone from the sky, though I knew there was no sun. And in the center of it all, a clock face hovered, bone-white hands turning over a void darker than anything I'd seen in the chamber. It inhaled, and the city went silent. We learned later that night that we were not alone in our experience. Every operator on the same shift had seen the same city, the same hovering clock, the same inhale that erased sound. We realized then that the clock could reach through dreams, bending not just perception, but memory itself. The next morning, the news reported an event that seemed impossible. A blackout across multiple countries lasting exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. No explanation, no warning, nothing. Our records showed nothing out of place, no solar flares, no system failures. But in our dreams, we remembered the city and the pause. The minute hand in the chamber had jumped forward during that blackout. It had already nearly reached midnight once before, in a time we weren't even aware of. History erased the event from memory. Civilization barely noticed. The clock had tested its limits, stretching our reality without leaving a trace for anyone to connect the dots. From that point on, every anomaly in the world seemed to follow its rhythm. Wars that ended too suddenly, natural disasters that deviated from predicted paths, entire species disappearing quietly from the record. Each movement of the hand aligned with something that should not have aligned. We tried to warn the higher-ups, documents, simulations, reports, but they were all dismissed, classified as speculative data. And yet, in the chamber, the hand continued to move, inch by inch, each tick more deliberate than the last. The shadows that had started to creep from the clock into the facility grew bolder. Hallways we had walked for years suddenly warped, as if the building itself were recalculating where we could and could not go. The tapping became persistent, insistent, not just in the chamber, but beneath floors, behind walls, even inside water pipes. It was learning, practicing, testing the limits of its reach. We realized then that the clock's movements were not arbitrary, they were rehearsals. Midnight was not a theoretical point in time, it was a destination, and the hands were guiding something to arrive here in our world. By the end of that third week, everyone in the facility was dreaming the city, the hovering clock, the inhale that consumed sound. We were no longer separate observers. We had become part of its process. It was learning us, preparing the world for whatever would happen when it finally completed its turn. And one night, the minute hand stopped entirely. Not just for a second, not as a correction, it froze. The shadows paused mid-step. The tapping ceased. The air grew unbearably still. And then, from somewhere beneath the chamber, a sound emerged that had never been there before. Something inhaling that was not the clock. Something older, something bigger,
something patient enough to wait for midnight to come again. It had been awake the whole time, and it was waiting for the hand to finish its turn.
By the time the 4th week arrived, I understood the truth we had been avoiding. The clock was not counting down to an event, a war or a catastrophe. It was counting down to someone. At first, we thought it might be a world leader, a scientist, a single high-value target. But the hands never aligned with public figures. The incidents, the dreams, the anomalies, they always seemed to follow the same invisible thread, a path that led toward me. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was paranoia, a side effect of the isolation, the constant exposure to impossible anomalies, the whispering that had begun to fill every corner of my mind. But the evidence was inescapable. Every shift pattern, every blackout, every shared dream, every shadow that stretched through the facility, it converged on me. The clock's hands accelerated subtly whenever I entered the chamber. The tapping beneath the surface of the black face would intensify when I focused on the hands. I began hearing my own name, whispered in the subsonic librations, stitched into the rhythm of the inhale, a sound that belonged both inside and outside my skull. Other scientists noticed, not outwardly, of course. No one admitted it. But in the cafeteria, in the hallways, eyes would flick toward me, unspoken fear reflected in their glances. And I understood then. The clock had begun recruiting the world to watch, not for my protection, but as part of its preparation. I began to dream differently. The ocean was no longer an empty void. In its center floated the clock, hands turning, and a figure, my figure, standing on the edge of the shadow, unable to move. It was waiting, patient, calm, and every breath it took pulled reality a fraction closer to me. The minute hand in the chamber moved faster each night, as if sensing the approach of its target. I could feel it through the floor, through the walls, even through the steel and concrete of the bunker above. The shadows that had been creeping through the hallways now lingered longer, stretching closer to my office, my quarters, even my dreams. Then came the first direct communication. Not a voice in the ear, not a whisper in the wall, but a message embedded in the environment itself. One evening, the monitors flickered, displaying only numbers. 001247. At first, I thought it was a glitch, but then the numbers changed. 001246. 001245. A countdown. And with each second, I felt the hand of the clock pressing closer, not on time, but on me. The facility itself seemed to react, lights dimming slightly, temperatures dropping, shadows stretching. Every heartbeat in the building echoed the same rhythm as the clock's hands. I tried to flee. I tried to stay in parts of the facility where I thought it couldn't reach, but the shadows found me. The walls shifted, even the doors moved in ways that made me feel trapped. And every time I glanced at the clock from the observation window, the hands seemed to align with my own pulse, mirroring me, anticipating me, counting down to the moment when the clock would finally touch me. I began to realize the purpose of the dreams, the whispers, the shadows, the blackened chamber. The clock was preparing me, conditioning me, teaching me how to exist simultaneously in this world and the one it was drawing closer to ours. And then I understood the ultimate horror. The clock had already begun the process of arrival. Midnight was not an abstract time. Midnight was me. The hand moved again. The tapping intensified. The shadows lengthened.
and somewhere behind the black face, in the heartbeat beneath the inhale, I felt a presence, patient, colossal, and inevitable. It was not waiting for humanity. It was waiting for me. I am the countdown, and the clock knows it.
The hand stopped. Not for a second, not for a correction. Stopped completely. The inhale ceased. The air grew still in the chamber, yet heavier, pressing down on me as if gravity had forgotten its proper direction. I realized, too late, that the clock had been patient all along. Every jump, every tap, every shadow, every dream, it had been measuring me, preparing me, testing the limits of what it could bring through. And now, it had decided. The shadows in the hallways no longer belonged to walls. They belonged to me. They moved with my steps, mirrored my thoughts. Sometimes they preceded me, stretching ahead into spaces I had not yet entered, showing me glimpses of myself standing somewhere I could not reach, waiting. I tried to run, but the hallways no longer obeyed the laws of space. Corners stretched into impossible angles. Doors led back to the chamber no matter where I went. The facility had become a maze shaped by the clock's intent. Then I saw it. Through the observation window, the black face of the clock cracked. Not like glass, but like reality itself tearing. From the fracture, a vast darkness pulsed, breathing. It was larger than the chamber, larger than the mountain, larger than the earth itself. The shadows on the floor converged, stretching upward into that darkness, and I understood that the clock was no longer just a device. It was the hinge between worlds. I could feel it reaching into me, probing, testing, pulling. My body was still in the facility, but my mind was no longer entirely my own. I saw through its eyes now, glimpsing cities I had never visited, oceans I had never sailed, skies I had never seen. I was both observer and participant, a witness to impossibilities. And then I noticed the last detail, the one I hadn't seen before. Every clock in the facility, every device, every heartbeat, every shadow, every line of thought, it all synchronized to the same rhythm as the minute hand. And now that hand had stopped, frozen at a single second before midnight. I understood the truth. Midnight was not the end of the world. Midnight was not death. Midnight was the point where the clock no longer needed to count. It had arrived, and the arrival was me. The chamber floor gave way, not literally, but perceptually. My vision fractured into 1,000 overlapping angles. I felt my consciousness expanding outward, but not freely, pulled, bent, reshaped, forced to acknowledge that my body, my mind, my life was now part of something much older than time, something that had always been waiting. The last thing I remember is a whisper, carried in a sound too low to hear, too vast to comprehend. Thank you for waiting. And then the hand moved again. I blinked, and the world I knew had vanished. I do not know where I am. I do not know if this is the facility, the mountain, or the earth. I can see the clock everywhere, in every shadow, in every corner of perception. It is patient, it is vast, and it is aware. If you are listening to this recording, it is too late for me. But the hand
will stop again. For you.
The hand stopped. Not for a second, not for a correction. Stopped completely. The inhale ceased. The air grew still in the chamber, yet heavier, pressing down on me as if gravity had forgotten its proper direction. I realized too late that the clock had been patient all along. Every jump, every tap, every shadow, every dream, it had been measuring me, preparing me, testing the limits of what it could bring through, and now it had decided. The shadows in the hallways no longer belonged to walls, they belonged to me. They moved with my steps, mirrored my thoughts. Sometimes they preceded me, stretching ahead into spaces I had not yet entered, showing me glimpses of myself standing somewhere I could not reach, waiting. I tried to run, but the hallways no longer obeyed the laws of space. Corners stretched into impossible angles. Doors led back to the chamber no matter where I went. The facility had become a maze shaped by the clock's intent. Then I saw it. Through the observation window, the black face of the clock cracked, not like glass, but like reality itself tearing. From the fracture, a vast darkness pulsed, breathing. It was larger than the chamber, larger than the mountain, larger than the earth itself. The shadows on the floor converged upward into that darkness, and I understood that the clock was no longer just a device. It was the hinge between worlds. I could feel it reaching into me, probing, testing, pulling. My body was still in the facility, but my mind was no longer entirely my own. I saw through its eyes now, glimpsing cities I had never visited, oceans I had never sailed, skies I had never seen. I was both observer and participant, a witness to impossibilities. And then I noticed the last detail, the one I hadn't seen before. Every clock in the facility, every device, every heartbeat, every shadow, every line of thought, it all synchronized to the same rhythm as the minute hand. And now that hand had stopped, frozen at a single second before midnight. I understood the truth. Midnight was not the end of the world. Midnight was not death. Midnight was the point where the clock no longer needed to count. It had arrived, and the arrival was me. The chamber floor gave way, not literally but perceptually. My vision fractured into 1,000 overlapping angles. I felt my consciousness expanding outward, but not freely, pulled, bent, reshaped, forced to acknowledge that my body, my mind, my life was now part of something much older than time, something that had always been waiting. The last thing I remember is a whisper, carried in a sound too low to hear, too vast to comprehend. Thank you for waiting. And then the hand moved again. I blinked, and the world I knew had vanished. I do not know where I am. I do not know if this is the facility, the mountain, or the earth. I can see the clock everywhere, in every shadow, in every corner of perception. It is patient, it is vast, and it is aware. If you are listening to this recording, it is too late for me. But the hand will stop again. For you. If you are still listening, thank you. Thank you for letting the darkness follow you this far. Thank you for witnessing what should never be counted. If the hand, the clock, ever moves again, you'll know it has noticed. And maybe, just maybe, it is watching you too. If you survived this recording, like it, share it, and subscribe, because the more of us who hear, the more it waits. And remember, the last thing the clock counts is witnesses. If you love the slow burn of fear, the stories that creep under your skin, subscribe now. Don't fight the darkness. Let it follow you.